Could you please introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Richard J. Mullins. I'm a surgeon, a professor of surgery at Oregon Health and Science University in Portland, Oregon. And I'm studying the influence that General Marshall's thyroidectomy had on his career. The basic narrative is that he developed atrial fibrillation, which is an irregular beat in his heart, in 1936, about the time, right before he was promoted to Brigadier General. And this created a problem because it might be used as a indication to medically discharge General Marshall from the Army, and therefore was a serious, in his opinion, threat to his career at a time which was critically important. He had some bouts of irregular heartbeat prior to that, and I learned today from his medical records those had been treated, but they were transient. They'd come and go. What happened is that in 1936 he developed fibrillation, and it didn't resolve like it had in the past. It didn't affect his endurance or his ability to function. In fact, he went through the maneuvers in southwest Michigan the end of August of that year without any difficulties. He was detailed to take command of I think it was the 5th Brigade in Vancouver, Washington, and he did that in October. And was still in atrial fibrillation. Vancouver Barracks is on the Columbia River, right across the river from Portland, Oregon, where I live. And General Marshall decided he needed to have this evaluated, so he had a civilian cardiologist, an expert, evaluate him. And it was this T. Homer Coffin, a man who was only 2 years younger than Marshall, who told Marshall he thought that his hyperthyroidism from his goiter in his neck was causing the atrial fibrillation, and told him that medical records at the time indicated about 80% of patients who had their thyroid removed would have resolution of their atrial fibrillation. So we all know Marshall is a very decisive man, and once he heard that, then he went down to the only hospital the Army had on the West Coast at Letterman and said, "I want my thyroid out." And that happened in the 15th of February, 1937. The surgeon is was Norman Kirk. He was a lieutenant colonel, and was distinguished at the time because he had written a book about amputations, and he was considered really an orthopedic surgeon. So it's of some interest to surgeons, to me anyways, today, that an orthopedic surgeon did the general's thyroidectomy. Usually they don't do thyroidectomies. General Marshall was very pleased with the results in that he could immediately see his pulse rate decrease, and within 3 weeks he had reverted to what we call reverted back to normal sinus rhythm, and the atrial fib had gone away. I was very pleased today to be able to work here in the archives because there are the medical records in the General Marshall 201 file, and it documents a number of things that I'd been wondering about. He, as I said, reverted to sinus rhythm. He had a board, a medical board, and the people on the board included Dr. Kirk, and at the end of that document they approve or recommend General Marshall for return to duty. So this operation, I think, was a success in that it restored his health And you could say that the outcome of it was that it enabled him to achieve his destiny. To make it dramatic, rescued his career. Now, what I also learned today is he continued to have intermittent episodes of atrial fibrillation. But by that time, he had become the chief of staff, and they treated him with a drug called quinidine, and it was controlled. But it sounds like he had intermittent episodes of this atrial fibrillation the rest of his life. The one other thing that I've learned today of interest is in regards to the general's thyroid gland activity. And if you have a thyroid that makes too much thyroid hormone, then you're hyperthyroid, and there's a particular characteristic physical exam and findings. And one of the problems is you get atrial fibrillation. The thyroid hormone stimulates the heart to fibrillate. After General Lieutenant Colonel Kirk, who later was the Surgeon General of the Army, that's a whole other story, in that Marshall didn't support the appointment of his surgeon as Surgeon General. But in any case, Kirk says in a note that he wrote, a really terrific note that you helped me find, Jeffrey, that was written by Kirk about a week post-op, and he was writing the letter to Coffin, the civilian doctor back in Portland, and he wrote it because Marshall told him to. And he describes how he did a very generous thyroidectomy, so there's a risk that the general, after this thyroidectomy, would have gone from hyperthyroid to hypothyroid. And that would have slowed him down and made him more deliberate and maybe reduced his capacity for hard work. And yet obviously he had an enormous workload through the Second World War. I mean, the stress of his work for a man who was in his early 60s must have been incredible. As well as traveling. I learned today from one of the letters that he would sleep when he flew in the planes. That me personally, I would be exhausted by the time I flew in these planes around the world. And he apparently had no problem sleeping. And he was very careful with his health after his surgery, and he limited the amount of work he would do. As people know, he would go in the morning and do the work, and then he thought anything that happened after 2 or 3 in the afternoon wasn't probably worth doing. And so he made very sure that he had relaxation, went home, rode the horse, and his wife made sure that no one got him out of bed in the middle of the night. So that's kind of a long explanation of what I think is a fascinating story. My plan is to write this up and submit it to a medical journal as an example of an operation that changed the course of history.
Great. Well, thank you very much for your time, and thank you for visiting.
Yes, thank you. I really appreciate it. This has been very helpful. Thanks.